The night still feels like a blur in my memory. The kind of night where your chest tightens so hard you can barely breathe. Your heart feels like it's punching through your ribs. The flashing red and blue lights washed over the neighborhood. Like something out of a movie, except this wasn't a movie. This was my driveway, my home. In all of it, every single siren, every armored figure stepping out of the truck was because of one person, because of Karen. The woman who couldn't stand the sight of my car parked in front of my own house. The woman who turned a simple HOA rule into an obsession so big it called a SWAT team to my street. I remember standing there, half frozen, as the sound of boots hitting asphalt echoed in the air. Neighbors peeked from their curtains, some filming. From behind glass, others whispering on porches. Their faces had that mix of fear and curiosity. Like they couldn't decide if this was a tragedy unfolding or free entertainment. And there I was, jaw clenched, wondering how the hell we got here. Wondering how a tow truck, and a woman with two, much time on her hands spiraled into rifles, radios, officers yelling commands like I was some kind of threat. You're probably wondering what happened. How does a parked car become a standoff? Why would the police believe her? Why would a SWAT team, of all people, arrive because of me? And the answer is it didn't happen all at once. This wasn't just one bad night. This was a storm that had been building for weeks, for months, until it finally broke. The first sign that something wasn't right was subtle, almost laughable. A note tucked under my windshield wiper. It was neat, written in block letters, signed HOA Enforcement. It read, "Vehicles must not be parked on the street overnight. Please move your vehicle immediately." I remember laughing when I read it because it wasn't true. Our neighborhood guidelines allowed street parking for guests, and even for residents, as long as the vehicle wasn't abandoned or left for weeks. My car had been there one night. I brushed it off. Maybe. Someone misread the rules. Maybe it was a mistake. Then came the second note. This one wasn't typed or neat. It was rushed, almost angry. "You think the rules don't apply to you? Move your car, or I'll move it for you." No signature this time, just anger pressed into paper. And that's when I started noticing. Her, Karen. Standing at her window at odd hours, peeking from her blinds like a watchdog. The first time I saw her, she had a phone in her hand and a scowl on her face, staring straight at my vehicle as if it were a monster parked outside her. Castle. I didn't know her then. Not really, but the look in her eyes told me everything. She wasn't just annoyed. She was obsessed. Still, I tried to be reasonable. I knocked on her door, introduced myself, explained the rulebook clearly. I even brought a copy, highlighted the section about parking. She barely looked at it. Instead, she crossed her arms and said, "Rules are rules. I don't care what you think you found in that book. That car doesn't belong out there." I wanted to argue, but her tone made me stop. It wasn't about the car. It wasn't about the rules. It was about control. She wanted to win. And people like her, people who breathe authority they don't actually have, they don't stop when you show them the facts. They stop when they've broken you. The weeks dragged on, and each day I could feel her eyes on me, watching every move I made. The notes kept coming, stuffed under the wiper, slipped into my mailbox, even taped to my front door. Neighbors started whispering, some siding with her, some rolling their eyes at her drama. But whispers have weight. Whispers spread. Suddenly, it wasn't just Karen versus MIT, it was me against the image she was painting of me. And then came the night. That night, I had just come home from work, exhausted, when I heard the grinding of gears outside. I pulled the curtain back, and there it was, a tow truck. Backing into position right in front of my car, Karen stood nearby, arms folded tight, lips curled in satisfaction. My stomach dropped. I rushed outside, shouting, "What are you doing?" The driver barely glanced at me. "Got a call. Says this car's unauthorized." He hooked the chain like he'd done it 1,000 times before. "Unauthorized," I snapped, pointing at my house. "This is my car. This is my property." Karen smirked, stepping forward. "The HOA doesn't allow street parking overnight. You've been warned plenty of times. If you can't follow rules, you don't belong here." I could feel the rage rising in me. This wasn't just about a car anymore. This was about her trying to erase me, trying to humiliate me, in front of the entire neighborhood. I pulled out my phone, showing the driver the rules, showing him my address. You're not towing this? Not tonight. Not ever. And that's when Karen did it. The thing that turned everything upside down, she pulled out her own phone and dialed. Her voice changed, suddenly frantic, terrified, like she was being attacked. Yes, operator. There's a man threatening me. He's out of control. He's dangerous. Please hurry. I froze. For a second I thought she was bluffing, that she'd hang up, that she just wanted to scare me. But she didn't. She kept talking, weaving lies so thick they felt real, describing me as aggressive, unstable, violent. She looked right at me as she spoke, her eyes cold and victorious, like she knew exactly what she was setting in motion. I tried to yell that it wasn't true, that she was lying. The tow truck driver looked uneasy, shifting from foot to foot. But the damage was already done. The call was out. Words were on record. Minutes later, though, it felt like Arzai heard the sirens. Not one car, not two, a fleet. And behind them, something bigger. A truck that didn't belong in a suburban street. Men stepping out in helmets, vests, rifles. The kind of sight you never expect to see outside your own house. And in that moment, as red and blue lights washed over my walls and radios crackled with orders, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just a feud anymore. This wasn't about HOA rules or a car in the street. This was a war she had declared, and she had just painted me as the enemy. You think you know how this ends? But trust me, you don't. Because the moment those boots hit the pavement, the story twisted in a way that none of us could have predicted. If you think Karen got what she wanted, you're dead wrong. Stay with me, because what happened next, I still can't believe myself. You'll want to hear every second of it. The lights didn't just flash outside, they carved their way through the blinds, painting every wall of my house in alternating streaks of red and blue. My living room looked like a crime scene, though no crime had been committed, at least not by me. My hands were shaking so badly I didn't even realize I was still holding my phone until it buzzed in my palm. A message from a neighbor. What did you do? 3 words. That was it. But the way they stung, it was like Karen had already won, because that's the real danger of people like her. They don't just accuse you, they convince others before you even open your mouth. And that night, she convinced the wrong people. The most powerful people. I stepped outside, arms raised, as officers shouted commands. I wanted to scream that I wasn't dangerous, that this was a mistake, but the words jammed in my throat. Every movement felt like it could be misread, every breath like it could be the last straw. The neighbors lined the sidewalks, now phones out, recording. 'Cause that's what we do when we're scared. We turn moments into evidence. One officer barked, "Step back!" Hands where I can see them. Another shouted at Karen, telling her to stay behind the patrol car. And oh, she played it perfectly, shaking, clutching her chest, tears streaming down her cheeks. You would have thought she was the victim of some home invasion, not the mastermind who orchestrated this circus. And then, like a scene ripped straight from my nightmares, the SWAT truck rolled closer. Bigger, louder, darker than everything else. Doors opened. Boots pounded the pavement. Helmets glinted under streetlights. These weren't the guys who came for parking disputes. These were the guys who came when lives were at risk. Except no life was at risk. Not until they made me one. But here's the part that will stay with me forever. As the SWAT team fanned out, one of the officers, helmet off, face hard but not unkind, looked me dead in the eyes. There was hesitation there, doubt like he'd seen this play out before, like maybe he knew it didn't add up. For a split second, I thought I had a chance. But then Karen screamed, loud, shrill, rehearsed, was reaching for something. Her voice cut through the chaos like a knife. And suddenly, rifles angled in my direction. I froze, every muscle locked, knowing one wrong twitch could end me. My chest burned with rage. She wasn't just trying to take my car anymore. She was trying to take my life. The world blurred into shouts, radios, commands, the metallic clicks of weapons. And right there in the middle of it all, I thought about something strange. The very first time I bought that car. The pride I felt driving it home, the way I washed it every weekend, how it represented freedom after years of scraping by. That car wasn't just metal and paint, it was mine. And now, because of her obsession, it had become a target. But here's the twist no one saw coming. While Karen spun her web of lies, another neighbor, one who had stayed quiet for months, finally stepped forward. His voice cut through the air, calm but steady. That's not true. He didn't do anything. All eyes shifted. Cameras panned. Even the officers paused. The man was older, retired, the kind of neighbor everyone respected. He'd seen the notes, the stalking, the way Karen prowled the street. He told them everything. And suddenly, the story didn't sound so clear anymore. Karen tried to interrupt, her voice shrill, but the officer with the bare helmet raised a hand to silence her. He listened. He weighed. He looked back at me, and I swear in that moment I saw the scales tipping. But here's where it gets darker. Because while reason might have been creeping in, Karen wasn't done. People like her never stop when they're cornered. They fight dirtier. She clutched her phone, waving it wildly, shouting that she had video evidence, though we all knew it was staged clips. Selective moments twisted out of context. And as she screamed, I realized this wasn't just about my car. This was about power. About how far someone would go to destroy another person, just to feel important. The SWAT team lowered their weapons just slightly. But the tension was still thick enough to choke on. I could feel it, the way one wrong word could snap it all back. And as I stood there, caught between truth and lies, I realized something chilling. This wasn't over, because Karen wasn't backing down. And neither was I. You think this is the breaking point, but it's not. The real breaking point was still coming. The moment when all her lies unraveled, when her mask slipped, and everyone saw her for who she really was. Trust me, you don't want to miss how that went down? Stay with me, because the next move she made, it changed everything. The air outside my house felt like it had been carved from stone, heavy, suffocating, pressing down on my chest with every breath I took. The flashing lights hadn't dimmed. If anything, they seemed to pulse brighter, painting every face, every wall, every trembling hand in alternating hues of red and blue. The SWAT truck still loomed like a beast at the end of the street. Engines humming, radios hissing. Neighbors had gathered in clusters, some daring to step closer. Others retreating just enough to feel safe, but not so far that they missed the show. Everyone was watching. Everyone was waiting. And Karen, she knew it. She stood there like a performer on stage, clutching her chest with one hand and waving her phone with the other, her voice quivering with a fear so rehearsed. It almost sounded convincing. He threatened me, she said loudly, making sure her words carried to every ear within reach. I told him to move that car, and he came at me, yelling, waving his arms. I thought he was going to hurt me. I opened my mouth to protest, but an officer raised his hand sharply. Not a word, he barked. His eyes cut through me like a blade, and for a split second I thought, this is it. This is where the story ends. Not with truth, not with fairness, but with the loudest liar winning the night. But then, from the crowd, a voice rose. Steady. Clear. That's not what happened. It was the neighbor who had stepped forward earlier, the retired man who'd lived here longer than most of us combined. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The quiet conviction in his tone drew every gaze to him. He pointed toward Karen, his hand trembling slightly, but his eyes sharp as glass. I've seen the notes you leave, the pictures you take, the way you stalk him, like some watchdog with too much time. Don't you dare stand there and act like the victim. The crowd rippled. Whispers darted from mouth to mouth, like sparks catching. In dry grass, some nodded, some frowned, some shifted uneasily. But all of them looked at her differently now. Karen's face twisted, her practiced expression cracking under the weight of scrutiny. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about, she snapped, her voice rising higher. You're old, you're confused. You've probably been fooled by him just like everyone else. Fooled. The man shot back, his voice trembling but strong. The only one fooling people here is you. I've lived here 30 years, Karen. 30 years. I've never seen someone poison a community the way you have. The officers shifted, glancing at one another. The man's words planted seeds of doubt in the air, seeds that refused to be ignored. And I saw it, Karen saw it too. That flicker of hesitation in the faces of the men holding rifles, that moment when they realized maybe, just maybe, they'd been called into a war that didn't exist. Karen doubled down, desperation dripping. From every syllable, "He's dangerous," she shrieked, pointing at me like her finger alone could convict me. "He's aggressive, he's unstable, you can't trust him. He threatened to kill my dog last week." My stomach dropped. That was a new one. I had never even spoken to her dog, let alone threatened it. And yet, in front of neighbors, officers, cameras rolling and shaky hands, she hurled the accusation like it was gospel. I tried to step forward to defend myself, but the officer closest to me shouted, "Stay back." His hand hovered near his weapon, his face etched with nerves. He wasn't sure what to believe anymore, and that was dangerous. I could feel the rage clawing at my throat. Not because she lied, that was expected, but because every new lie built on the last, stacking higher and higher until they formed a wall around me, a wall I couldn't break through with truth alone. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about convincing the officers. Not yet. This was about convincing the audience. Because whether I liked it or not, my neighbors had become the jury. Their eyes, their whispers, their videos, they would decide whether I was a monster or a man. So I turned not to Karen, not to the SWAT team, but to the crowd. "Do you hear her?" shouted, my voice raw. Every time someone calls her out, she changes the story. First it was about parking, then it was about threats. Now it's about her dog. What's next? What else will she invent just to feel powerful? The murmurs grew louder. Some neighbors nodded, others crossed their arms, but all of them watched. Her, with new eyes. Karen's mask was slipping and she could feel it. She clutched her phone tighter, waving it like a weapon. "I have proof," she hissed. "I recorded everything. Oh, you'll all see." The officer with the bear helmet stepped forward finally, his voice calm but firm. "Then show us." For the first time that night, Karen hesitated. Her eyes darted back and forth, her lips tightening. She had recordings, sure, but not the kind that told the whole story. Selective clips, snippets pulled out of context, angles that twisted reality into fiction. Proof, yes, but only proof of her obsession. And in that hesitation, in that single pause, the crowd saw it. They saw her. One of the younger neighbors, a woman who had kept silent until then, spoke up. "I saw you the other night, Karen, sneaking around with your camera at midnight, taking pictures of his car like some kind of stalker. Don't act like you're the victim here." Karen spun, eyes wild. "You're lying," she shrieked. "All of you, you're all against me." Her voice cracked on the last word, and suddenly the performance faltered. The tears dried, the trembling hands stilled, and what stood there wasn't a frightened victim, it was a cornered predator. And predators, when cornered, lash out. She lunged forward, pointing at me again, her face red with fury. "He doesn't belong here. People like him ruin neighborhoods. If you don't get rid of him, I will." The words hung in the air like poison. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The officer stiffened. And in that moment, everything changed. Because now, it wasn't about me. It wasn't about my car. It wasn't even about rules. It was about her, about the hatred she couldn't hide. Anymore, the officer with the bear helmet narrowed his eyes, his voice low. "That sounded like a threat, ma'am." Karen froze. Da-da-da-da-da. For the first time all night, she looked rattled, truly rattled. Her lips parted, then closed, then parted again. No," she stammered. "That's not what I meant. He doesn't follow the rules, that's all." But it was too late. The crowd had heard it. The officers had heard it. And the mask was gone. Still, the night wasn't over. And the tension wasn't gone. Because even though the tide was turning, even though the truth was bleeding through, she wasn't finished yet. People like her never are. They burn every bridge, scorch every field, poison every well, because if they can't win, I'll make sure no one else does either. And I knew, deep in my bones, that her next move would be the one that changed everything. So I stood there, fists clenched, heart pounding, staring at her across the flashing lights, knowing the storm hadn't broken yet. Not yet. The street felt like it was holding its breath. It's a kind of silence that isn't really silence at all, but the hum of nerves stretched so tight they're about to snap. Even the flashing lights seemed slower now, pulsing like the heartbeat of the neighborhood itself. Karen stood there, trembling with rage. But not the kind of trembling that comes from fear, the kind that comes when someone knows their grip on power is slipping. And I swear, in that moment, everyone could see it. The lies dripping off her, the cracks spidering through her mask. The way her voice had betrayed her when she spat out those last words. The officer with the bare helmet, he seemed to be the only one who wasn't swallowing her story. Holt took one slow step toward her. His voice was even, but there was no mistaking the edge in it. "Ma'am, I need to ask you again. Do you just threaten your neighbor?" Her eyes darted left, then right, like a cornered animal looking for an exit.
"Ah! No," she stammered.
I didn't mean it like that. You don't understand, he's dangerous. I was just trying to protect the neighborhood. Protect that word. She wielded it like a shield, but all it did was echo hollow against the crowd that had finally begun to see her for who she was. Murmurs spread through the neighbors against shaking heads, whispered disbelief, the kind of side eyes you don't recover from. I wanted to shout, to tell everyone this was the proof, the moment that showed she was the aggressor all along. But I didn't have to, because just then, the older neighbor, the retired one who had already spoken, stepped forward again. He wasn't trembling this time. His voice was steady, his presence unshakable.
"Ash!
You've been harassing him for months, Karen. We've all seen it. Some of us didn't want to get involved, but enough is enough. Tonight you crossed the line." Karen whipped her head toward him, her face twisted with fury. "You don't know what you're talking about. You're all blind. You don't see what he's really like." But the crowd wasn't nodding with her anymore. Weren't agreeing, weren't rallying to her side. They were staring at her like she was a stranger in her own neighborhood. And I could feel it, this subtle, powerful shift. The story she had been spinning for months, the web of lies she had woven so carefully, was unraveling thread by thread in front of everyone. The officer raised a hand to quiet the crowd. His eyes never left Karen. "Ma'am, do you have this so-called evidence you've been talking about?" Her phone shook in her hand. She fumbled, unlocking it, scrolling furiously, muttering under her breath. She pulled up a video, thrust it forward, her voice shrill. "Here, watch this." The officer took the phone. The SWAT team shifted closer, forming a half circle around him, their rifles now angled toward the ground. The crowd pressed forward, trying to peek. My stomach churned as I imagined what she had clipped together, me walking to my car, maybe raising my hands in frustration, maybe caught mid-shout without context, enough to look bad if you wanted to believe it. The video played. Karen's shaky camera work showed me stepping outside one evening, talking to her from across the street. My voice was firm, frustrated, but not threatening. Then another clip, me pulling a note off my windshield, crumpling it angrily, and another me on my porch, shaking my head, muttering to myself. That was it. No threats, no aggression. Just a man being watched, documented, stalked. The officer's brow furrowed. He looked up at her slowly, his voice even. "This is your proof?" Karen's face blanched. You don't see? He's hostile, he's unstable. Look at the way he's acting." But the crowd wasn't buying it. They weren't blind anymore. Saw what I saw. A neighbor obsessed, building a case out of nothing, fabricating. A monster out of shadows. One of the younger officers leaned toward his superior, whispering, but his voice carried just enough. "She's wasting our time." Karen heard it. I saw the panic flare in her eyes. She lashed out, her voice cracking. "You're all against me. He's dangerous, I know it, and if you don't stop him now, you'll regret it." That was the moment, the last desperate card. She had left. And it backfired spectacularly. The officer snapped his fingers, and 2 SWAT members moved in, their boots crunching against the pavement. But they weren't moving toward me. They were moving toward her. Karen stumbled back, her hands flying up. What are you doing? He's the one. He's the one you want, not me." "Ma'am," the officer said firmly, "you've made false statements to emergency services. You've escalated a situation that didn't exist. Hey, do you realize how serious that is? Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She shook her head violently. No, you can't. I was protecting the neighborhood. But her protests were drowned out by the sound of handcuffs clicking. The SWAT team didn't treat her roughly. They didn't have to. So the humiliation alone was enough. The crowd gasped. Phones held higher now, capturing every second. For once, the camera wasn't pointed at me. I stood frozen, my heart thudding, my fists still clenched at my sides. It should have felt like victory, but it didn't. It felt heavy. Like the weight of everything that had happened still sat on my shoulders, pressing down, refusing to let me breathe. The older neighbor stepped closer, resting a hand on my arm. "It's over," he said softly. But his eyes told me the truth. It wasn't really over, 'cause lies like hers, once planted, leave scars. The kind you don't see until later. As they led Karen toward the patrol car, her voice rose again, desperate, manic. "You don't understand. You'll see. Belong here. None of you are safe." Her words echoed through the night, bouncing off the houses, hanging in the air like smoke that refused to clear. But the crowd didn't flinch. They didn't believe her anymore. I looked around at the faces the neighbors who had doubted me, whispered about me, assumed the worst. Some avoided my gaze. Some offered small, sheepish nods. And some finally looked at me like they saw me for the first time. Not a threat. Not a monster. Just a man who wanted to live in peace. The SWAT team began to clear out, the hum of engines rising, the radios crackling with relief. The flashing lights dimmed one by one until the street looked almost normal again. But it wasn't normal. Would never be normal again. When the last car pulled away, I stood in the silence of my driveway, staring at the car that had started it all. My car. Still there. Still mine. But forever tainted by what it had cost me. And here's the part I need you to understand, the part that still keeps me awake at night. This wasn't just about a car. It wasn't just about an HOA rule twisted into a weapon. It was about what happens when people abuse power, when lies are louder than truth. Someone like Karen decides your life is hers to control. That night I learned how fragile peace can be. How quickly it can shatter when the wrong person picks up the phone. And I learned something else too, something I want you to take with you. You can't stay silent when someone like that takes root in your life. You can't look the other way, hoping they'll stop, because they don't stop. They grow bolder, louder, more dangerous. Until one day you're standing in the middle of flashing lights, the rifles aimed at your chest, wondering how the hell it all went so wrong. So if you've ever been pushed, cornered, lied about, if you've ever felt powerless in the face of someone who twists reality, you know exactly what I mean. And you know why this story matters? Don't let people like Karen win. Don't let their lies become the truth. Stand up. Speak out. Because sometimes your silence is the very thing that gives them power. And trust, you don't want to find yourself where I was that night, staring down the barrels of rifles because one person decided to play God with your life. If you've stayed with me till now, thank you. Truly. This story wasn't easy to tell, but it needed to be told. And I need you to hear this. Watch until the very end of stories like these. Share them. Talk about them. Because the more we shine a light on people like her, the less power they have to keep us in the dark. This is more than my story. It's a warning, and I hope you carry it with you.